Hey, good morning. How you doing today? Good, man. End of the semester, great time of year. I was here at AU back in the 90s. This is always my favorite time of year, partly because I was not a great student. Actually, I was a great student, but there's a lot of room between an A and a C, a lot of fun between A and a C, so I always said that, I probably had a lot more capacity than I showed. How many, just make some noise if you're graduating this year. Let me hear the graduates in the room. Any graduates here? No graduates in the room. Oh, man, everybody's staying around. Make some noise if you're here next semester. Yeah, all right. Well, good. All right. As I pulled into campus today, man, so many memories just flooded my mind as I came back. My faith journey, in fact, the song we just sang, "Because He Lives," that was a song at our orientation before my very first semester, and I was just struggling. Like, man, am I going to be able to do this? Can I, walk this new season? And we sang that song. Of course, I think it's a Gaither song, right? So I mean, it's pretty familiar and popular around here. But that was there was a lot of hope in that. I was thinking back as I just rolled in and began to walk, through this upper part of campus right here, back to my sophomore year. I got a letter my sophomore year from the AU registrar. I don't think anybody ever in the history of the university's got this letter before. Basically, the university said to me, "Hey, Curt, we can't take your money anymore." And I'm like, "Oh, I thought that's what you did." I thought like anybody who was signed up, they just take your money, you can take classes. And, kind of the rest of that story was I was in my second year of undergrad. I hadn't declared a major. I'd showed up. I didn't know what God, had in store for me. And I felt like I'd explored everything. I mean, from, the business department to education. I had a heart for people that were lost, people that didn't know God. And I had an advisor my very first year that was a computer programming in the computer programming department. He was convinced I would be a great computer programmer. I didn't even know what that was in the 90s. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. I took a class, hated it. So I just coasted through taking all my liberal arts classes for the next 2 years. And I got to April, about this time of year, my sophomore year, got this letter. They're basically like, hey, you can't enroll because there's nothing else left for you to take until you declare a major. And so I just started wrestling with God. It was about second week of April, and I said, God, I have looked at everything. I don't feel like you're coming through for me. I've been looking for what you want me to do. And it's like God in a small voice, and I've never heard God audibly. It's usually more of an intelligent, an audible, intelligible impression is the way I would say it when I hear from God. And it's like God said, yeah, you've looked at everything but this one thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing ministry. I come from a string of pastors. My dad's a pastor. My grandfather's a pastor. Love the church. Love the church growing up. I wasn't the typical pastor's kid that, was rebellious and ran off and hated the church. I loved the church. I couldn't understand why God would want to put me in a church around a whole bunch of already convinced people instead of out with people that need to know who Jesus is. And so I'm like, I just feel like that's where I'm supposed to be. And so God and I wrestled with it for, a few weeks. Got near the end of the semester, and finally I kind of relented, and I met with Don Collins, who was the campus pastor at the time, and just kind of told him the journey I'd been on. And he said, Curt, I've got a class next semester. It's Intro to Ministry. You're going to have to declare something. Why don't you declare ministry? Give the class a shot. You don't have to commit to it long term, but it'll get you back another semester. So I did. And that class led to my heart being opened up to the potential of what maybe uniquely God wanted to do in my life. I, continued the ministry journey, picked up a soc major, so I double majored in sociology, Christian ministry. And I kind of just continue to make deals with God. I'll do this, God. I'll go into ministry, but I don't want to be a lead pastor. And so, now I'm a lead pastor. You can see what happens when you tell God what you're not going to do. And so, but I started there. So, graduated in May of '95. One of my professors said to me, like the last week of class, hey, would you be interested in an internship at our church? And I'm like, gosh, that would be great. I hadn't even thought about that. And so, landed at Park Place Church, doing an internship with Bill Ferguson. A good friend of mine, he left three weeks later. He accepted a lead pastor role in another church and left me with his group of students, and I became the interim. And so, as a result, over that summer, my wife and I interviewed with about 15 different churches, just trying to say, okay, God, where do you want us in student ministry or kids ministry, small groups ministry, wherever. And we just didn't get any clarity. And later on that summer, Park Place was without a pastor at the time. They hired a pastor, and he came and said, hey, we want you to stay on board here. And we just really feel like that's where God wanted us for the next season. So we spent almost 5.5 years, met many of you. I see some of my dear friends here that have been friends since. For the next 5 years after that, I went on staff with a church my dad had started as a startup in the north side of Indy. Spent almost 6 years doing discipleship with children, students, adults, developing adult Christian education. And then that's where we really got a burden to start what is now Crosspoint back in 2006, and really just had a heartbeat for people who didn't know God. A lot of our friends who we'd talk about church and they would just check out of the conversation, and yet they were interested in spiritual things. And so, through that journey, a lot of mountaintops, a lot of valleys, a lot of moments where, we've had, you go through great times. You're like, wow, this is amazing. Times where you just like, God, I don't know what's next. And just learning to navigate those, which kind of leads me to the text that David shared with me to share on today, Romans 15. And so I want to talk a bit about what does it mean to have hope for the future. And so here's what we read in Romans 15. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and all peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope that comes by the power of the Holy Spirit. And that's easy when things are going great. That's easy when life's going pointed in the direction you want. But what does that look like? It's hard to grasp hope. I mean, you guys have been wrestling with hope over the last number of weeks, and hope can be so inspiring at times. I mean, it's what keeps us going. We're like, oh man, I have a hope for something more. It can feel hollow, kind of like I'm hoping for something. There's nothing tangible I'm doing to actually give me some confidence that this is going to come about. It can be evading at times. It's difficult. I think hope is a difficult thing to put our minds and our hearts around. In fact, I have a friend who has this great phrase. He's a mentor of mine. We've been friends for a number of years. He kind of serves as a staff volunteer at our church, hosting our services. And he has this phrase. He says, you have to participate in your own rescue. We get to moments, he says, you have to participate in your own rescue. And I love this phrase because it's so true. And what he means by that is, there's times where we're looking forward to what's in store, what God's doing in our lives. And it's easy to just sit back and say, okay, God, I don't even know what to do. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait on you. And my friend Vince is like, yeah, participate in your own rescue. Meaning if we want to get to new places, we've got to figure out, okay, if God has a God-dreamed future for me, what's my role in getting there? I have a hard time figuring that out. I have a hard time figuring out where my energy stops and God picks up. I have a hard time figuring out where do I let go and where do I let God. And so, this phrase, participating in your own rescue, like God invites us into the hope that he gives us that actually prepares part of the future. At the same time, that hope has to be in something more than just something we have, right? Something that resides in us. So I want to look today at one of my favorite stories that kind of reminds me of this. And as a result of this, I'm then going to give us an application that I just think, man, if we could do one thing that actually gives us a hope for the future, I want to give you something, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So I want to look at a story from the Gospel of Luke, and this is a healing story, all right? And this is the moment where Jesus heals 10 lepers. And here's what it says. Luke tells us that as Jesus made his way into Jerusalem, he went along the border between Samaria and Galilee. He was going into a village when he was met by 10 men suffering from a dreaded skin disease. And they stood at a distance and they shouted, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. So Jesus saw them and he said to them, go and let the priests examine you. Now here's this crazy, this next phrase in this is crazy. On the way, meaning as they begin to take one step after another, as they begin to actually just do what Jesus had asked them to do, this is on the way they were made clean. When one of them saw that he was healed, he came back praising God in a loud voice, and he threw himself to the ground at Jesus' feet, and he thanked him. And then this next sentence, kind of an outlier sentence, the man was a Samaritan. And as we know, Samaritans weren't real welcome, frowned upon. They weren't the in crowd. That's the guy that goes back and gives thanks. Verse 17, it says, Jesus spoke up. There were 10 who were healed, right? Where are the other 9? Why is this foreigner the only one who's come back to give thanks to God? And Jesus said to him, get up and go, your faith has made you well. This story is so fascinating to me because it gives us some handles, I believe, on the posture, like a game-changing posture when it comes to what it means to have hope for the future. And it's interesting because Jesus heals 10, right? I mean, it's 10 different individuals that he heals. Only one of them turns around and says, thank you. And so you have to ask the question, like, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference in the 10%er versus the other 90% that for whatever reason, I'm sure they were busy, they had plans, they had things to get to, but only one of them turns around. And the writer actually gives us a clue right here in the story. I mean, check this out, this next verse. And this just popped to me a few years ago when I was working through this. It says, when he, meaning the 10%, when he saw what had happened, that he was healed. And so it says he actually paid attention. It said he noticed something that everybody else didn't notice. And he turned around only when he saw what had happened. And he went back and he fell on his face in front of Jesus. And he said, thank you. And so the difference between the one who said thank you and the 9 who did not, at least according to the text, is that he noticed. He saw, he's like, oh my gosh, something changed right here. That's the difference. He noticed God had done something. I have another friend who, and I kind of surround myself with people that are encouraging and speak, words of wisdom, because I'm not all that sharp, I'm not all that smart. I'm as good as the people around me. And so I have another friend that has this phrase. He works a lot does a lot of work in the mental health industry. He says, we have to find the miracle in the molecules. Because what you and I, if you're like me, I often find that I make little, I have molehills and I turn them into mountains. You've heard that phrase, turning mountains into, making mountains out of molehills. He says, we got to find the miracle in the molecules. And he calls this profound noticing, this idea of actively, intentionally, purposely seeking the greatness in the gaps. When things aren't going our way, when we can't exactly make sense of what God's doing, where's God working, why are things not going the way I want, how do we see the greatness in the gaps? Now, a couple handles here I want us to look at in terms of what it means to be a profound noticer, because this actually leads to this hope for the future. First thing is this: noticing, just being a noticer actually results in gratitude. And see, the crazy thing is nobody can actually make you be grateful. Nobody can force you to have gratitude. But when you notice, oh my gosh, look at what just happened right here. Look at this little molecule. This might actually be the hand of God right here. When we notice those little things, all of a sudden, we kind of stand back in awe. Some of the words we just sang, God, we worship you. We're in awe of you. We have to take time to notice. And when we do that, there's something that overflows out of our life. Our gratitude actually leads to hopefulness, because there's something powerful about noticing. In fact, researchers, they did this fascinating study. It was led by a guy by the name of Dr. Robert Emmons at the University of California a couple years ago. And it was just simply on the power of noticing. In fact, there was an article called Why Gratitude is Good. And they kind of document this study where they were talking about how they said 1,000 people between the ages of, get this, 8 and 80, so a pretty wide span of individuals from students all the way up to seniors. And they asked them to do one thing: keep a gratitude journal. Gave them a journal, and they said, we just want you to notice things that you're grateful for and record them. And so these 1,000 individuals, they found that those who practiced gratitude consistently, they had any regularity with writing in their journal, just something they were thankful for in that particular day. They said that the benefits were amazing compared to those who didn't do this practice. In fact, here were some of the benefits. They said physically, these individuals who practiced this act of just keeping a journal of gratitude, they had stronger immune systems, less aches and pains physically, lower blood pressure, exercised more, get this, slept longer, and felt more refreshed after waking. Who wouldn't want that, right? It's like you slept in a Holiday Inn Express last night. Those are for those of you who have been around for a few decades. Psychological benefits. They said there were higher levels of positive emotions. They were more alive, alert, and awake. More joy, more pleasure, more optimism, and more happiness. Again, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want to be around people like this? And then there was more social benefits. These people who just noticed things, wrote them down, were more helpful, more generous, more compassionate, more forgiving, more outgoing, and less lonely and isolated. It was amazing, just by the power of noticing, just by actually taking a moment to write down, hey, I just noticed something. I'm thankful for this right here. It wasn't this, we say, well, I'm thankful. I sit down at the table. I'm like, thank you, God, for the food. We have this very mundane, we have a moment of pause. And sometimes my kids pray this way. I'm like, really? I'll interrupt the prayer. I'm like, really? This is how we're doing it? We're thanking God in a, like a Humpty Dumpty voice, like, God, thanks for the food. Thanks we got to be here tonight. No. What they found is profound noticers. They go, oh, my God, look at what you just did. Look, I know there may be bigger things I'm going after. I may be praying toward a greater solution. But I want to pause and I want to recognize right here. They noticed the miracles in the molecules. And I want to give you a moment to kind of prime the pump on this in just a second. But here's the other thing that happens. Not only does noticing, being profound noticers, result in gratitude, but the other thing we see in this story, that this story of the 10 lepers shows us, is that gratitude actually leads us to encountering Jesus. And that's my prayer for you. That's my prayer every single weekend when I get up and speak in front of people, when we gather like this. It's like, how can we help people take one step closer to encountering Jesus at a next level? And that's going to be different for every single one of us. But what it reminds us is we begin to see, oh man, God actually is good. Okay, maybe I don't have everything resolved that I'm praying for. Maybe I don't know exactly how, my scenario or what I'm looking for, my next job or my family situation is going to work out. But man, I see the miracle in the molecules, and I can step back and go, oh my gosh, God is good. I have a good, good Heavenly Father, and He's worthy of me just saying thank you. And what happens in this story with the leper right here, he turns around and he notices, he goes back to Jesus. And remember, by the way, he was the outsider, all right? This is the guy who shouldn't have been in a one-on-one with Jesus in this moment, all right? This isn't the guy we should be talking about 2,000 years later. He's the one guy who we shouldn't be talking about. But he noticed, he returned, he walked back, he said thank you to Jesus, and he encountered Jesus one-on-one. Not 10-on-1, wasn't a group session. He got a one-on-one encounter with Jesus because he simply noticed, he took a moment to pause. He said, oh my God, look at what you just did. I can't leave this moment without thanking you. Man, I'm hoping today, as you think about it, what are you grateful for? I'm going to give you a moment to kind of process here in a moment. I hope it leads you to more and more of that. To more hope, more experience, more one-on-one encounters with Jesus. Which brings us back to Romans 15. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and all peace as you trust in Him. Why do you trust in Him? What gives you confidence in the future? What gives you a sense that, oh man, these things I'm hoping for, I'm looking for, why do I have any assurance that Jesus is trustworthy on this? Well, it's because I've paused, I've noticed, I've seen the miracles in the molecules. And as a result of that, I overflow with hope that comes not because of something in me, because of the power of the Holy Spirit. The same resurrection power we've been talking about today that allowed Jesus to do what dead bodies don't do, to get up and walk out of the grave. That same power at work in you and me. Now, why am I telling you all this? It's the end of the semester. For some of us, it's the end of a season. It's the beginning of a new era, summer. Summer was my favorite time in college. I know it sounds really bad. I love learning. I'm a lifelong learner, but I love summertime. Some of you are heading into seasons where you don't know what's next. Some of you, perhaps you have plans and you know exactly what you're doing next. You know what internship you're going to, you know what job you're working on. Maybe you're in your career right now. You're here as a student. You have your plans laid out. I can assure you those plans probably won't go exactly as you planned. I would love if they do. I'm going to be praying that they do, but I can assure you, just based on my experience, usually they don't go the way that we've planned. You know, for some of us here today, you don't even know what the future is. You're sitting here going, gosh, hope for the future. I don't even know what the future holds. That was me when I was here at AU, 27, 30 years ago. I had no idea what God was going to be doing in my life. Some of you have plans that are literally unraveling as you sit here right now. You have things you thought were going to be taking place, and they're beginning to unravel and fade. And I know it's probably easy for you to think, Curt, gosh, you've had experience, you've been through where we are. I didn't go to seminary, by the way, so I haven't fully been through what you guys have been through. Done ministry, got established in my career. Your life's probably going great. Let me tell you, I'm in ministry 27 years. The last year has probably been the most difficult in 27 years. And there's a number of reasons. I'm not going to get into all of them, but I began to battle depression about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. My counselor therapist, one of my best friends. You need a healthy counselor. It's one of the best things you can do in ministry. I've been on a mental health journey. As a result of that, some of the outcome of COVID over the last 4 or 5 years just did a number on me as a leader. My wife and I have been in a season of repairing our marriage, just not because of any major violations, but just the toll it's taken on us. Crosspoint, we're 17 years in, we're a startup trying to help people find their way to God. We had hundreds of people ready to start campuses, got into COVID. We said we didn't shut down, but we went virtual, out of love for our community. It became a very divisive, polarizing time politically, socially. None of us have ever gone through this. We had a lot of people loss, a lot of financial loss. We're financially rebuilding this last fall. We got caught in a refinance of our mortgage that our lender is not able to refinance with us, and refinancing is so difficult and so expensive right now, and we're still working on a solution. I wish I could tell you right now a solution. I've got about 4 months for us to figure this out before we've got to make more catastrophic decisions. And so there's a lot of things that aren't exactly going the way that I hope right now, but I can tell you that the last year has been one of the most hope-filled years I've experienced in 27 years of ministry. And part of it's because it's led us to ask some deeper questions about ourselves and who we understand God to be. One of them being, God, what do I really believe about you? I followed you a long time. I thought starting a church and leaving an established church and a paycheck and a bunch of people and going someplace where we didn't have a people or a paycheck or a building, that took a lot of faith, but apparently you're still growing faith in me. But it brings us back to this question, what do I really believe about you? Do I believe that you do see me and you do hear our concerns and you do see the needs that we have? And do I actually believe that you will take care of them? And if I do, how might I live differently today as a result of my belief in that, my hope in that? It's led us to questions like, God, what do we really believe you're doing in our life and through our life? And all I can tell you is in the midst of that, while there may still be some unknown in the future, when you begin to notice the miracles in the molecules, and you begin to just take inventory of what God is actually doing, man, you begin to see how good God is. You begin to see, man, God, listen, I've never slept outside. I've had a meal on our table every night. My kids are doing well. 2 of them are at Butler University, 2 of them in junior high and high school. I mean, you take an inventory back and you go, oh my gosh, God has been so faithful. And as a result of that, oh my gosh, that's where my hope is, what God continues to do. So I'm going to give you one thing to do today. We're really big on application. You can come into spaces at Crosspoint or space like this and be like, oh man, that was amazing, so inspiring, which you may not be thinking that at all. I'm not going to begin to believe that. But I think we should all walk out with something we can do, we can implement that actually changes the way we live today. And so I'm going to give you something that you can do every single day. And I just want you to know, I'm not a fan of silver bullets. This is a silver bullet. What I'm going to give you right now, I can't explain it. It's magical. I can be having a horrible day, and it can change not only my day, but my week and my month all in one moment, just by this simple rhythm right here. It can turn just my perspective on a dime. And so here's the question I want to ask you to kind of get to this. What is your daily rhythm to remind yourself of how much you have to be grateful for? What is your daily rhythm? Just ask yourself, what do I do every single day to remind myself of how much I have to be grateful for? And you might go, gosh, Curt, I don't know. I don't even know that I really have a rhythm. I've never thought about that. To which I would say, this is exactly why we struggle at times with having hope for the future. I mean, we're like, hey, Jesus can do all things, but it seems so hollow at times. What's your daily rhythm of recognizing what today you have to be grateful for? Because perhaps you're missing some of the things that God's actually doing in the present, in the molecules, the little miracles. Because we're looking for the mountain to be moved, but perhaps right now God's just moving the molecules. And so maybe one of those rhythms, one of the things I do every single day, one of the things I want to just encourage you, challenge you, prod you, twist your arm to consider, is to write it down. Say it out loud every single day. Write it down. In fact, I want to give you a chance to do that right now. If you have a device, which I know we all have a device, right? Everybody has a device. I read the other day that 75% of Americans are within a device reach without even having to move their feet 24 hours a day. So we always have our device. So that's why I say grab your device. I want you to open up a notes page, an email, wherever you keep notes in your phone. Just open up a page. And I just want to ask you in these closing moments as Mick plays to just make a list. Just make a list right now. 5 things today. 5 things right now that you are grateful for. It could be semester's coming to an end. You did better than you thought. It could be that you just did really well on a test and you were able to show your knowledge better than you thought you were going to be able to. Maybe there's something relationally that you just have seen God show up in. Maybe it's you had a home-cooked meal this past week. Like, that was so amazing. I just want to thank God for a home-cooked meal in the midst of this season. Maybe you're praying for something big and God hasn't answered it yet. You're still waiting, but in the midst of that, He has been so faithful to sustain you and give you endurance as you're waiting on the answer. And so just make a list. I do this every single day. I've got a list. This is my 2024 thank you notes and reflection. I'm sure you have a rhythm that you do every day to prepare yourself and to connect with God. For me, I do the verse of the day in the YouVersion Bible app. It's where I start every single day. It's one verse. There's a little video with it. The reason I do it is because I champion that every single weekend in our services with people that don't know where to start. And I want to know what I'm telling them to read. So I start reading it every day. And it's crazy because I'm like, oh, this is pretty elementary. What I find is 4 out of 4 or 5 days a week, I'm like, that's exactly what I needed today. Spend a little reflection on it. I read the book of Common Liturgy for Ordinary Radicals as part of my devotional time right now. I read there. I take some ideas. I reflect on them, do a little journaling. I just make a list of people I'm praying for, and then right after that, in fact, today, I make a list of things I'm thankful for. 10 items on there today just from the last 24 hours. I'm telling you, it's a game changer. And it'll remind you, when you don't feel hope, it'll remind you what God's doing right now. And it'll do exactly what Paul's talking about here in Romans. Here's what's going to happen. as the God of hope, will continue to fill you with all joy and with all peace as you trust in him. Why are you trusting in him? Because you're seeing he's reliable. He's never let me down. So that you may overflow, not with hope that you've conjured up, but with his hope that comes from the power of the Holy Spirit, the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. And so just take a moment, finish your list. Mick's going to play, then he's going to close us out. God, as we're making our list right now, man, just fill our hearts with gratitude. Help us to see just even the little molecules and the moments that we're experiencing right now, your faithfulness, your goodness in those moments. And God, may that build in us a trust, an encounter, an experience, a deeper intimacy with you, and because we want to be people who overflow with hope. So help us to see those things. Help us to be profound noticers. And we ask that as a result of that, you would continue to fill us with your Spirit, with which nothing is impossible.